So let's look at 98.9 or on 98-9 duty report unsafe conditions. Client requests for secrecy. This is a kind of a spectacular case in the spectacular circumstances. I would imagine that very few engineers in their career are faced with the kind of situation that engineer A and engineer B are in this case, where you are personally involved with a potential public disaster, the possible collapse of a large commercial building. I mean, these things happen. They don't happen to most engineers, but it is something that happens. So it is a classic case, I would say, um, in the same class as 08-10, the last case we looked at in terms of a conflict between first canon and fourth canon duties. But let's look a little more closely at what the parts of the code that the BER says are in play here. References. First canon, no doubt. Engineers in the fulfillment of their professional duties shall hold paramount to safety, health, and welfare of the public. And then two others, um, I would say, of particular interest in this case. Section 2.1.c, engineers shall not reveal facts, data, or information without the prior consent of the client or employer, except as authorized or required by law or this code. And that's a specification of the first canon, but there's also a specification of, uh, I would say, the fourth canon as well. Engineers shall not disclose without consent confidential information concerning the business affairs or technical processes of any present or former client or employer or public body in which they serve. This is a very important part, I would say, of professionalism, and that's confidentiality. I suppose that everyone in certain situations, in terms of their jobs or their business affairs, could be subject to a kind of a duty to keep things confidential, but that's a special duty of professionals. That is the confidentiality of the client or employer's work product or financial affairs that you have a privileged access to as a professional. The duty to keep those confidential is a very strong duty, a very real and important duty, I would say, of being a professional. Um, the doctor, doctor patient confidentiality, lawyer client confidentiality is an important sort of part of the lore of being a doctor or a lawyer. I mean, we see these things all the time in dramas where this duty to keep confidential information concerning your client or your patient is a big part of the drama. Well, it's a part of being an engineer too. Um, so this duty is a very important part. It's one of the, I would say, prime duties of an engineer, any professional. The duty to keep things confidential and not reveal facts or any facts concerning the client to anyone else. Obviously, this is a very special situation in which that duty or that presumption, the presumption that things need to be kept confidential, is strongly questioned and, in fact, overridden. That seems to be the point of the case, is that in certain situations, that duty to keep confidentiality is overridden by a stronger concern, and that is the first canon. This is a big first canon case. We will look at other cases that have to do with public safety and public welfare that are not as dramatic and sort of cataclysmic as this case. Um, but that seems to be the purpose of the case, is to say that under certain conditions, and that would be, in this case, an imminent danger to the public and presumably a person's right to know when they are being put at risk, overrides that duty to confidentiality. In every case, that has to be a judgment call. There's no there's no hard and fast rule about when the duty to confidentiality, which is part of the fourth canon duty, is overridden by a larger concern. That's a big, I would say, a big point in engineering ethics, is that there's a duty, presumed duty, fourth canon duty, to be a faithful agent and trustee. But there are any number of imaginable situations in which that duty is overridden by a stronger duty, and in this case, the duty to protect the public. So it's an extremely interesting case, I would say, and would also say, the question I asked you in the discussion board is an important question. There are any number of non-engineers who are involved in this case, owners of the building, people who are involved in some way who are not engineers. And the interesting thing is thinking about whether the engineers involved have a different ethical relationship than the non-engineers, the non-professionals, to what's going on.